What is shakin', Internet? This is Saltz bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies Council of Elders LFR guide. The Council of Elders are the third and final fight in the first quarter of the Throne of Thunder raid, which in LFR is called the Last Stand of the Zandalari. The trash leading up to Council is almost entirely forgetful, even though there is a ton of it. Simply AoE the mobs down. Do be careful though, as having all of them on you will be quite painful, so try to split the adds amongst the tanks as best you can. These trash mobs are pretty plentiful, so it'll take quite a bit of work to get all the way through them. Once you finally work your way through all the adds, you'll get to the last room. But before you even pull the council, you'll want to clear the patrolling mobs on both sides of the room, in both entrances. This will require you to kill one side and then backtrack to kill the other side. It's important that both sides die, as having adds up with the boss will just be bad. As for the council itself, it is mostly a straightforward fight that should require 2 tanks. There are 4 bosses that do not share a health pool, so AoE and cleaves are extremely useful. Before I cover each boss and their abilities, I'll give you a brief overview of the strategy. As the fight goes on, one of the 4 bosses will gain a black aura around them from being possessed. Whichever boss this is, they should be the main target for the raid's DPS. The boss with the black aura will slowly fill up an energy bar, and if that ever reaches 100, it will begin doing massive damage to the entire raid, almost guaranteeing a wipe in LFR. The only way to prevent this is to do 25% of the boss's health in damage while they're possessed, meaning if they were at 75% when they were possessed, they need to be at 50% before the possession will go away. This possession will jump back and forth from boss to boss. It always begins on Frost King Malak, and I believe goes through a set rotation of Malak, Khazra, Sul, and Marli, then goes to random targets for the rest of the fight. When they are possessed, each troll is going to do slightly different things, which we'll cover now. Oh wait, one final thing about the fight before we're diving into those boss abilities is the basic tanking strategy. For ease of the fight, try to group up all the trolls in one spot so that all the raid can very easily AoE them. Malak is very easy to group up, since he's melee attacker. Marli and Sul will continuously cast spells, so they need to be interrupted briefly and then pulled into a single spot while they're silenced. And you should always try to keep Malak, Sul, and Marli together for maximum damage. Khazra will roll around at random, so don't worry about him. Now let's talk bosses. First up is Frost Lord Malak. He has 2 abilities besides his melee attack. Biting Cold is one that doesn't concern you, where he'll target random raid members and do damage to them and people near them. Frigid Assault, however, is the #1 most important tank mechanic in the entire fight. It will begin stacking a debuff on Malak's target that does absolutely nothing until it reaches 15 stacks. If you get 15 stacks of Frigid Assault, you'll get stunned for 15 seconds, which is like forever. Tanks should constantly be using any active mitigation to dodge or block these attacks while tanking Malak, and do a tank swap as soon as the stacks reach around 10 throughout the entire fight. When Malak is possessed, the move you don't care about, the Biting Cold for those keeping score, will turn into Frostbite. All this does is do continual damage to that random raid member that it hits for 30 seconds, but it does less if one person is standing nearby, though they'll share the damage. This absolutely doesn't concern you, though, unless the person who is frostbitten is standing right next to you. In a perfect scenario, the person who gets this frostbite attack should go stand with one other person away from the raid to reduce the damage a lot and not spread out the rest of the damage to everyone. Either way, moving on. Khazra Jin is up next. You should never have to worry about this guy. He'll roll around like a madman at random players, doing a bit of damage but not being able to be tanked. When he's possessed, he'll get stunned after he rolls, but reflect a little bit of the damage back to whoever's attacking him. Nothing too fancy here, and nothing really for any tanks to pay attention to. Third is Sul the Sandcrawler. This guy is a pain. He has 2 main abilities that he'll cast continuously throughout the entire fight. First is Sand Bolt. Sul will cast this over and over and over again, and it can be interrupted, although it doesn't really matter to you. Additionally, he'll spawn quicksand in the arena over the entire fight. These little swirly pools do damage and put stacks of slow on whoever stands in them. Additionally, if people stand in them too long and get 5 stacks of the slow, they'll get snared and can't move for a bit, meaning even more damage because they're snared inside of the pool. Just don't stand in the swirlies and you'll be fine. Let's see. When he's possessed, Sul immediately starts off with a sandstorm, which is an ability that turns all the little swirlies into adds. This means that when Sul starts up, you'll have to be ready to round up all these adds very quickly. These pools will be spread out all over the place, so hopefully you're a monk and can just start throwing out some kegs. If you need to run around a bit, go for it, but try not to go crazy running around like a madman for long, and try to pull all the adds back to the bosses just for AoE. The best course of action would be to have whoever isn't tanking the Frost King to go grab all the adds, so that the bosses move around as little as possible. However, since it's LFR, I really depend on the other tank to do anything more than taunt when necessary, and sometimes not even that. So don't let these adds kill off your raid while waiting for the other tank to do stuff. Okay, last up is High Priestess Marlee. Marlee herself is pretty simple, mainly only doing one thing, which is casting Wrath of Loa. This is just a normal spell that does some damage to a random player, but it can be interrupted. Just to note that when she's possessed, she pretty much casts the same thing over and over again, and it's still interruptible. The only difference is the type of damage. It does Shadow when she's possessed, and Holy when she isn't. But that shouldn't concern you much at all. However, she has another slightly different ability. First up is Blessed Loa Spirit. Whenever she's not possessed, Marlee will summon Blessed Loa Spirits. These spirits will move towards the boss, one of the 4, that has the lowest amount of health. If it reaches them, or is still alive after about 20 seconds, it'll heal that boss for a small amount. It says 10%, it doesn't feel like 10% at all in LFR. There's really nothing you can do about this spirit. I will say that marking it with a skull might be a good idea, but don't worry too much about it. In normal, it's important to tank Marlee away from the other bosses, so that there will be lots of room to kill this spirit as it moves to the boss. But in LFR, it's much simpler just to tank them all together and ignore the spirit completely. Oh ho ho, but we're not done yet. When Marlee is possessed, she'll create Shadowed Loa Spirits instead of Blessed Loa Spirits. These fixate on players instead of bosses. If they reach the player or don't die within 20 seconds, the player goes splat and instantly dies. Similar to the other spirits, tanks really could care less about these spirit adds, but these are more important to kill than the Blessed Spirits, because the Blessed Spirits don't heal that much in LFR, but these things instantly kill your raiders no matter what. If you can, put some DPS out on the spirits and mark them for the raid, but don't go chasing them down. And that's pretty much it. Let's go back to the start and give a brief recap. First up, tank all the bosses together in one spot except for Khazra, and try to have Marlee on one tank and Sul on the other. Frost King will be taunted whenever the other tank gets high on stacks, around 10 or 11 or so. Don't stand in swirlies on the ground, and when Sul gets possessed, make sure one of the tanks rounds up all the living sand adds. That's all you really need to know is the tank, and the rest of the information is just for the rest of the raid. As I said, try to mark the spirits with a skull or something so people see them, and be sure that the raid knows to be killing the troll that is possessed with the big black aura around it, or you'll be seeing that determination buff soon. Major differences in normal are priorities and positioning. As I said earlier, you'll want to tank Marlee away from the other bosses to avoid any healing from her spirits, and DPS will have to focus down the spirits ASAP. DPS will also have to watch who they're killing, since the spirits will always go to the lowest target health, which hopefully isn't Marlee herself. The other major mechanics are still in play, but there's nothing that's incredibly different to point out at this point. Well, I hope you enjoyed this guide for dummies. Please like, favorite, subscribe, all that jazz. And as always, you keep it salty, Internet.